All right, so I'll just leave that up the whole night, I think. So I'm getting all excited because I'm getting more and more snitches who are sending me insider emails about stuff going on around them and what's going on. So I'm all thrilled about that. So I get an email from a family whose kids are a part of the Manitou public school system. And they've announced a new curriculum that they're implementing inside of the Manitou Springs school system. And this comes from the Western Educational Equity Assistance Center. Now, doesn't that just sound like a wonderful name for some curriculum? So this is actually based out of Metro State in Denver. It's a community college actually in Denver, but it's a collection of educators who are sort of inside of the social justice world, the critical theory world. You go through their About Us page and so forth, and it's just, you very quickly kind of look these people up and you see where they're coming from and what they're doing. And so part of what the Manitou Springs School District has done is they've just told parents this is a lot of the curriculum that we're going to be implementing and using to work with a lot of the kids. Now, the primary thrust in this curriculum, they call it anti-bullying curriculum and striving for equity in education. And you read through a lot of their stuff and you think, oh man, this is great and this is great. This is at least okay. But you just go through their resources and their frequently asked questions and so forth. And you pretty quickly understand that this actually comes with the whole worldview, the moral assumptions that are built into what we're calling the woke worldview. Okay, so that term that we use for woke worldview is covering all of these things we've been talking about for several weeks. It's the shorthand that we're using. So a lot of this has to do with sexual ethics and so forth. There's a little screenshot of part of that curriculum. They're teaching teachers to do X, Y, and Z with students as far as the LGBTQ point of view goes. And then what's always interesting is when you find stuff like this on someone's website. I know it's a little bit hard to see, but the teaching tolerance section there in the bottom, this is a project of the Southern Poverty Law Center. So the Southern Poverty Law Center for several years now has made themselves infamous by collecting what they call the hate speech list. And you can go to their website and you can click on your city and on your state, and you can see who in your state is a hate speech group. And it includes Christian groups in the state of Colorado that just simply identify as Christian. So one of their markers for a hate group is a group that is Christian identified. They actually have a whole category for a Christian identified group. They are an interesting and very provocative group of people. But this is not just something that happens again somewhere on the East Coast or in Silicon Valley somewhere. This is something that is coming out of Denver and is actually a part of some of our school systems now too, right here in our backyard. Now this next one is just for fun. Now just kind of let this sink in for just a second, and let the complications sort of roll over you for just a moment or two. So New York City, rather famously, several weeks ago implemented a vaccine passport policy for all indoor events and gatherings, not just stadiums and big things, but restaurants and on and on and on. And New York City has been rather famously, I think in the last year and a half, hand in glove with BLM and their projects and so forth. And now we come up upon a problem where a hostess asks some African-American women who are traveling from Texas for their vaccine passports, and just everything blows up. So now BLM is going to protest NYC, a restaurant where black women were denied service due to lack of vaccine proof. Which one do you do here? Who wins, who loses in this one, right? So this woke ethic is actually starting to consume itself. It's like that snake that just kind of keeps eating its tail. Who's going to win? Who's going to lose here? So this was the headline yesterday. The headline comes out this afternoon. It's even more complicated than you would think. So the protests began today out inside of this little restaurant somewhere in the middle of New York City, and they were yelling things about white supremacy and white power, and that's why these women were denied access into the restaurant and so forth. The restaurant then verified with the New York Times that, well, the hostess who denied entry were Asian and Latino, so nobody was white in this whole thing. But you've got this whole set of assumptions, and now you've got this circular problem. The New York Times, it was a couple of weeks ago, they were writing about these vaccine passports in New York City, and they said at the time, roughly 28% of young black men were vaccinated inside of New York City. So you've got the creation of, according to their own standards, a systemically racist system if you impose a vaccine passport. In some 70 to 72% of young black men are not vaccinated. What do you do with that? Well, here's one of the things that's going to end up happening with that, right? So this woke ethic just keeps on folding over upon itself. Now, one of the reasons I bring this up is that I want to spend just a couple more minutes talking about the woke ethic itself, why it does this, why it ends up with complications that are like this, that are unresolvable complications, and complications that will just keep getting worse as time moves on. So the woke ethic, and we've put a lot of the pieces of this puzzle together so far, but let's make sure that we're just kind of clear on a few things. The woke ethic begins with the primacy of the individual. So when we speak of ethics and what is morally right and wrong, or we can eventually throw in what might be religiously right or wrong inside of that mix, the woke ethic says there's no such thing as an objective moral truth, but it comes out of subjective experience. And so a person's, and this is that phrase that we talked about a while ago that we hear a lot, a person's lived experience is their only access to truth. When you say stuff like that, then you can't oppose what someone says if they label it as part of their lived experience. So morality becomes very subjective. Grasp on truth becomes very subjective. So this is core to the woke ethic, that an individual's lived experience, their perception of what is true, is kind of the final answer as to what is actually true. The whole true for them, true for you thing in the woke ethic is a very real deal. Furthermore, inside of the woke ethic, we've got this problem. Moral and religious truths are not just things that don't exist or you can't access, but if someone proposes a moral standard that belongs to everybody, or a religious standard that we think may belong to everybody, the line now is, well, that's oppressive. Then you're imposing your point of view on somebody else. They have a different background, they have a different experience. So what you're doing is oppressive. And remember now that the world is divided into oppressors and those who are oppressed. That's the structure of society now. That's what makes things right or wrong. So if the moment someone is labeled oppressive, they immediately become the bad guy. And so the only way to fix being the bad guy is to cease being oppressive, is to cease talking about truth, religious truth, moral truth, and increasingly anything that can be considered true at all, including mathematics, history, and on, right? This cycle just keeps spinning further and further down all the time. So to be adequately woke means that you have to oppose truth claims, at least certain truth claims, okay? This breaks down eventually, but this is the basic thrust. You have to oppose truth claims. We've discovered you have to oppose claims of reason, the use of reason and logic, including things like mathematics. All of this is oppressive. It comes from the white hegemony, the white European background, even if you go as far back as Plato and Socrates and Aristotle, morons, right? They're all oppressors and oppressive. I always know someone's going to get some of these references every now and then. So to be adequately woke, you have to oppose all of that. You have to reject all of that. and all of the artifacts that come from that belief system as well. Anything that's inside of the Judeo-Christian belief system has been oppressive, and we have to reject it. This is why, in large part, things like capitalism are rejected, because it's labeled as oppressive, and people talk about it as if it is oppressive, and it comes from the Western white world, and so, it's been used to oppress, boom, 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 so we have to get rid of it. We've talked about the whole whiteness thing several times. All those things just get lumped in that category. This is all part of the woke ethic. And remember, I keep saying this because this just keeps drilling itself into my brain as well. As we talk about this worldview, we're not talking about something that wants to fix problems around the edges. It wants to fix the very core of what we believe to be right and true and just and on and on. So they're actually right at the very core of what we believe to be right and true. And by we, I just mean culture itself. And so this is important. This is an important thought when it comes to this idea. When objective truth or your ability to access objective truth are denied, all that's left is power. All that's left is power. Okay? If you get rid of the idea that an objective truth outside of us exists, you're left with nothing but us and what we say is right and wrong. So if we as a group want to decide what is right or wrong morally, who gets to impose their will on everybody else? Well, the people who have accumulated enough power to have their way. So when you get rid of truth, you actually open the door to nothing but power. And it's the irony of the position. They claim that truth itself is oppressive, but in order to get people to believe that there's no such thing as truth, you have to overcome every human being's innate sense that there is such a thing as truth. Does that make sense? You actually have to overcome it. In other words, you have to overpower them. You have to overpower them politically. You have to overpower them through education. You have to overpower them socially. You have to overpower them on social media, make them afraid to say X, Y, and Z, maybe actually even change their minds. You actually have to exercise power to get your way. Now, this is a thing for me because I've been reading about this and dealing with this for a long time now. In large part because large sections of the evangelical church fell for this 25 years ago. It was called the Emergent Movement. And these are young Christian pastors 25 years ago. I still think of myself as a young Christian pastor. I'm just going to hang on to that through delusion as long as I possibly can, right? So, but 25 years ago, when I was actually relatively young Christian pastor, this emergent movement arises, and what they're doing is they're trying to interact with a postmodern worldview. And so their reaction to that was that, well, postmodernism teaches us all these things about truth and access to truth and how it doesn't work and all of that good stuff. And so we have to change our sense of narrative and truth and story. And so they took the objectivity away from Christian doctrine and teaching, and they turned it into story. So they accepted the postmodern worldview and began to chip away at truth itself. And surprise of surprises, a lot of those Christian ministers and pastors and teachers who were at the tip of that spear 25 years ago are no longer Christians. In fact, they're very vocally no longer Christians. So they just removed themselves out of objective truth and tried to pull as many people along with them as they possibly could. So I have blog posts from probably 2004 and 2005 that tell you that within 5 to 10 years, so-and-so is no longer going to be a Christian. And it took 2 or 3. It didn't take 5 or 10. So, I may not be a prophet. My wife thinks I'm a prophet. No. It's not prophecy. It's just what I like to call logic. What's that? I know it's very oppressive. I'm sorry. I don't mean to make anybody feel left out here or hurt. What a sleight of hand, because this is right. If you're part of the oppressor group, you can't talk about truth or reason or morality or religion because that's all oppressive. But if you are somehow inside of that intersectional world of the oppressed individual, your lived experience can now be imposed upon, and you can actually get somebody fired from their job if they don't say the right thing. You can, these articles just keep showing up, these professors who keep losing their jobs and people who keep losing their jobs because of Title IX implications and on, because of, one group labeled as oppressed gets to just kind of do this to other people who are labeled as oppressors. It is a wonderful little sleight of hand. And it's an important thought for us to keep in mind, because belief in truth, or belief in truth is really just a belief in the way things really are. The way the author and philosopher Dallas Willard puts it, reality is just what you bump into when you wake up in the morning. Or he'll say it's just what you bump into when you're wrong, because reality just says, oh, I'm right here. So what does it take to get somebody to believe something that is just sort of objectively true, versus what does it take to make somebody believe something that is objectively false? So think about it like that for a second. What does it take for me to get you to believe that the sun rises in the east? We just kind of point you in the direction of east and we wait for the sun to rise. Yeah, you have to get up. By the way, we have prayer tomorrow morning at 5:30. There's room for you here. And you will be able to watch the sunrise in the east tomorrow morning, whether you like it or not. But what is that process? That process is just pointing to something and saying, there it is. And we all have access to that thing that's outside of myself. I have nothing to do with that. My belief in the truth of that has nothing to do with you or with it or with me. I just bump into it every morning. So that's what's true. Now, what does it take for me to get you to believe that the sun rises in the west? Right? It's the Star Trek episode where Captain Picard is told there's X number of lights when there are a different number of lights, and he'll be freed the moment he lies about the number of lights that are in the room. It's the end of the book 1984. It's the same story. It's power, 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 power. If I can get you to believe something that is false, I have power over you. So this entire system is based on power. This entire system is based on trying to get people to believe things that are objectively ridiculous or objectively false. This is why education is so important. That, we change the curriculum, we work in education, we get a hold of kids kind of early on. This is why social media pressure is so important. We can at least silence people who believe differently, and if we're lucky, we'll get some of them to switch sides as well. It's just power, 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 power. Which is why this phrase we talked about early on is so important. Do not live by lies. Alexander Solzhenitsyn, that little essay that he wrote, he said, we just learned we had no military power. We had no social power. We had no media or political power. All we could do is get together with each other and talk about the truth and refuse to live by lies. Don't give them your soul, he said. You may not be able to do much else. Just don't let them into your soul, right? So, and it becomes the foundation for what we sometimes call virtue signaling. It becomes the foundation for how woke business works. We talked about this a little bit last time. Virtue signaling. There's a British journalist by the names of James Bartholomew who claims to have coined the phrase virtue signaling. This is how he describes it. One of the crucial aspects of virtue signaling is that it does not require actually doing anything virtuous. It does not involve delivering lunches to elderly neighbors or staying together with a spouse for the sake of the children. It takes no effort or sacrifice at all. It's a candy coating where you can tell everybody, I do these things, I believe these things, and then you can act like anything you want. You can behave any way you want to. It's the candy coating that matters. It's the glitter on the cow patty, right? Hoping that the only thing people see is the glitter and nothing else. This is what virtue signaling is. This wonderful book, Woke Inc. I mean, if you're half interested in this kind of stuff, May, can you click to the next? I don't know what. Oh, no worries. There we go. It's a fascinating book. But this guy is CEO of a biotech company, graduate of Harvard, all this kind of stuff. He talks about how this kind of ethic, this virtue signaling works inside of woke businesses. And this is part of what he says. Thanks to woke capitalism, the rules for morality itself are now up for sale. But stakeholder capitalism gives us the worst of both worlds. Woke capitalists in America get to make money with their dictator buddies abroad and act like they're saving the world back home. So this is at the end of a chapter where he talks about all these businesses that are doing, they're making money hand over fist under the table from the Chinese Communist Party, while here in the U.S., they have their diversity and equity directors, and they're saving the world, and they're recycling bottles, and they're using wind power. All the while, they're helping to fund genocide in China. He says, this is how it works. And when you remove objective morality, you've got nothing left but this kind of thing. That candy coating, that glitter, that's really all you need. And he says they've got enough power that this is actually what these businesses now are doing.